Report. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarwick. Sejan.
Hey, Dev. I'm trying to determine how much I want to talk about what the hell just happened and how much I might want to keep it under my hat until I have more information for everybody. But the world is weird and wild, Dev.
Yeah, no, I think a teaser of what you were just doing that delayed the start of recording is fair for the listener.
Well,
I mean, and also in my defense, I kind of like threw shade at you for delaying the start of recording. I was 10 minutes late. I will own my 10 minutes latitude because I don't want to shame you at all.
Let me let's talk about this because I think this is an important thing to talk about. Is I like it feels like, Dev, that as far as Hollywood is concerned, movies are back, right? Like there's been a very beefy. There's been a very beefy effort the last week or two to really make sure that everybody's fully aware that the Hollywood machine is running again. I have seen a trailer or two drop every day for 2 weeks for upcoming movies. Most don't even have dates anymore because they were slated for certain dates. Then COVID happened, then a strike happened, then a second strike happened. Like, I, there's a I'm going to use the term desperation, and that sounds a lot sharper than I mean it, but there is a desperation the last couple of weeks from movie companies to really want us to all be very aware that things are okay and they are making movies again.
So I see your desperation, and I raise you, as of Monday, February 19th, the top 5 highest grossing movies for 2024. Do you want me to start from the bottom, or you want me to start from the top?
Start from 5, and let's work our way up to number 1. Let's.
Numero 5 was Madam Web with her $51 million.
Wow. I didn't realize we were starting there.
Yeah,
wow.
That's at number 5. Number 4, I have forgotten what number 4 is. If I say the other ones, it will come to me. But I've also now just suddenly decided to forget what number 3 is. I feel bad.
You had this listed.
I had the list in my head, and then I'm like, I can remember it. I'm Devin Decker. Apparently cannot remember it. Status of Devin Decker now in question. Don't love that.
Okay, your top 5 that I've got. Bob Marley, One Love.
Bob Marley, One Love was number 4.
Does that bring it up?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think I know what number 1 might be.
I know what number 2 and number 1 are. So if you could tell me 3.
I'm not. I'm actually seeing
Argyle. Argyle is 3rd.
Okay, I was going to say I am seeing Argyle, but what's weird is I'm seeing Argyle, and according to the list that lists it as number 3, seems to have made less money than Bob Marley. This list I'm looking at is confusing because it lists them as they are like gross. I think what it is it's updating in real time.
It's probably updating in real time,
but not updating the standing in real time.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. So now I got it. So let's start. So number 5 is Madam Web with 51 million. Number 4 is Bob Marley, One Love, which released the same day as Madam Web. So all of them only had a weekend to get to the 4th and 5th slot. Number 3 is...
I will say both were very heavily dependent on the weekend they released, which was Valentine's.
Yes, very true.
They were, yes, we only have one weekend, but also I don't think either of these movies are too sure of what they're going to do outside of that particular window. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So number 3 is Argyle, a film that I saw and apparently just flew out my mind. We could talk about that later. Numero 2 is Mean Girls remake.
Mean Girls.
That's also a musical because apparently people are upset that we're not disclosing that musicals are musicals anymore. Hollywood is so back. And number 1 is The Beekeeper.
Yeah, number 1 pretty much with a literal bullet.
Yeah. So Hollywood needs the world to believe that Hollywood is back this week more than ever. Because if Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2 doesn't light the world on fire, Hollywood might not be back. And I have to say, all conjecture from a member of the Say Report team, all of these are only representative of Devin Decker. Everything I'm about to say, I don't think that Dune 2 is going to do it. And
I don't know.
feel
I've
bad
got a lot of
saying
people out
that.
on this end that are very excited about the ability to actually go see it in a theater. Like it's got a very kind of good chance in terms of like story, like not the movie story, but like people were very kind of on the fence about the ways in which they had to watch the first movie, and the idea that they were kind of had to watch it from home rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So there is a little bit of an opportunity here for them to kind of capitalize on that kind of conversation from last time. And we talked about this.
Oh,
Like
we did,
the
yeah.
creator of the movie Straight Out like came out and you mentioned him already. Dennis, I thought it was Dennis, but you said David.
Oh, it's Dennis. Dennis Villeneuve.
Yeah. But
And I don't think that pronunciation is correct. I will admit that, but that's just
but
reading it.
he famously with Dune Part One had a lot to say about the ways in which it should be seen in a theater, that kind of thing, and was very mad about the ways in which it was going to be distributed straight to home. Not that he felt like people should risk COVID for his movie. He seemed to be willing at the time to say that maybe we should hold off on putting this out if we don't feel like we're comfortable just putting it in theaters. Maybe now's not the time for it. I don't know. It was a weird conversation to have in that moment, right? Because we,
Hmm.
COVID's got a vaccine now. Does it? But who's taking it? And does that even matter? Like in the long run, people still need to be masking it up, and who wants to be sitting in a theater surrounded by a bunch of strangers wearing masks that may or may not be proper masks, depending on all that shit. Like there was just so much around that first movie that this second one. And again, this is just very anecdotal shit, but like the ways in which people out here have been talking about it, a lot of us are just very excited about the ability to go and see it and get to see it in the theater. I actually had a straight up conversation the other day where what we were looking for is me and a few friends are actually trying to figure out if anybody's going to dare to put both of them together out, or at least allow, because if we could go see the first one and then maybe get like a lunch break to come back for the second half, for the second part, would be kind of awesome. Like it's that kind of experience that I would pay for and spend my day doing, right? So I know that there is always a risk in the way that things have been going with people just not going to movies anymore. There's a very good chance that we're Dune Part Two is not going to be the thing that everybody wants us to believe it's going to be, because oh my god, all of the advertising and all of the specials and all of the interviewing that's going on with that movie, the ways people are talking about Dune 2, it does sound like, again, smacks of desperation. So there's always a chance that that's all going to fall super flat, and I don't know, man. But I will say that of the coming films, that one really is one of the few. I mean, people have been talking about Dune 2 for months now, in a way in which we've talked about how I have straight up had to explain to people that Madam Web even existed, right? And so
That's
I like, yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, part of it is I wonder if the cork of the Super Bowl, right? The Super Duper Bowl there, because I forget that we can't say the name
we can
of,
say the name. No,
but
let it come for us, NFL.
but that idea that something popped, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that was released that day. As we noted, not necessarily during the game itself, but rather adjacent to the game in various ways, right?
Hmm.
But like that idea that day kind of being the big announcement advertising day for a lot of things, and then there just being kind of this windfall after that of a bunch of stuff. But also, again, I think there's also just a ton of stuff that just kind of got backlogged due to all sorts of things, strikes and illnesses and things like that. And so, like, I this feels like there's a lot of clearing the shelves going on, as it were, right? Like we just have to get this movie just out now. Like at this point, like we cannot wait any longer. We need to move on to other projects. And so there just seems to be just a lot of stuff that's going to be we're gonna be inundated, I think, for the next year probably. And I I'm curious to see how that affects so many things, because people aren't going to movies anymore. Noticeably, it's not the biggest players that have stuff out there. Yeah, Dune is WB, but like beyond that, I'm not seeing. There's not a lot of Disney Marvel stuff on the slate except for Deadpool. But like we're talking about one movie that isn't even
Yeah.
It's in a weird space of not really being a Disney Marvel property, but now is type thing, you know, like it's not one of their standby tentpole like franchises for that world, right? It was for a different company.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be wild to see what it becomes for Disney.
I don't know. It's just looking at everybody was unsure of going to see Dune in theaters, ends up making 108,000 domestically, which I thought it was going to be higher than that. But then 2 months later, No Way Home comes out and it does 800,000 domestically. So, I mean, that discussion there, that drive for Dune, I mean, that's just something I looked up while we were talking now. But also, most of the people that I have talked to about Dune, again, my level of the anecdotal is, well, I ended up watching the first one at home. I can just wait to see the second one at home. Like that whole fear of if we release this at home, it's not going to drive people to the theaters. Dune 2 is proving that with the conversations that I am having with people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like I said, there's a very good chance. There's a lot going against this movie right now in so many ways. But I'm not ready to discount it because there hasn't been a movie yet this year, as we just mentioned with the top ranking movies of this year. There hasn't been one yet that everybody has gone to, right? We haven't had that Barbie moment yet this year, and we might not get it at all. We might not get it for months. We might not get it till Oscar season at the end of this year. But inevitably, there will be that one movie that everybody's talking about this year. But it's not like it was pre-COVID, where this was happening once a month, 2 times a month sometimes, where everybody seemed to just be going to the movies every other fucking week and to talk about movies, you know, and that's not, you know, I miss like that time, right? And we've talked famously about how we have really dialed back on the ways in which we used to go to movies all the time in college, right? But like we were still pretty frequent moviegoers. I don't think anybody would argue that. And even we don't go to theaters that often anymore. Even we don't really watch it. Like it takes like kind of a really important kind of film to push us to consider to go to the theater. And we are the kinds of people that are more willing than most to go, right? And so I'm very curious what's going to happen this year with film, with the number of movies coming out that are supposedly big, like catch-all films for wide audiences, right? I'm not talking about a bunch of. I mean, I don't think Dune. I don't think Dune is trying to hit a niche audience. I think they are trying to hit a pretty wide audience.
I think they're trying to go wide too, but which is why it's so strange, right? Because Dune, I mean, growing up as like a book and as a movie that existed and had like its weird defenders and its weird detractors and everything about it, it always felt like a really niche property. And then when we look at how Dune released and what it made in the box office, it kind of still seemed a little niche. And now that like Hollywood is back and we're going to the movies again, it's weird that Dune 2 seems to be the linchpin that they're hoping that like well,
you can't discount the home viewing numbers. Like one of the things that was huge about Dune was that so many people did see it. And we know that what they did is they chose to see it at home. And so this is one of those moments where we could look at the box office all we want, but what was going on that year and that month and that moment was a very...
But they don't give us those numbers. Do we know how many people watched it at home? Like, I can only conject
But
on
we know
this.
it did good enough that despite only making $108,000 in theaters, it still got its second... Like, with all of the headache that movie caused WB, for them to turn around and say, okay, you can finish it. Because remember, that's the other thing, is that they basically were like, you need to see this movie because we really want to make the second half of it. Like, there was this whole push of like, if this movie doesn't get seen, we might not get the opportunity to tell the other part of this story. And they did, right? And so like, you have to believe that on some level it did well enough, right?
I mean, I want to believe that. I don't. I guess that's the thing, right? We know that people saw it. People clearly watched it. Whatever metric they have to measure that they do not share with us has to have justified them making part 2. And now that part 2 is coming out, it's just like what it seems to be, the desperation you're talking about, and the fact that like Dune 2 is now going to be a decisive movie, and if it doesn't succeed, then I mean the decisive movie is going to get pushed down the line, probably to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Like this will be how we determine if theaters are back, if movies are back. It's just
Ghostbusters probably Ghostbusters has a really good chance of being maybe that one that everybody goes to, right? Despite my feelings about the what is it, Afterlife?
Afterlife, the third one is Afterlife.
Right, despite
I mean, they're not.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. I had to do the math in my head on what you meant by that, but yeah. Yes,
well, I mean that in that continuity.
Right. I understand. Yeah, I got there. But despite my personal feelings about Afterlife, right? Like that movie definitely has its fan base, a quite large one, in fact. And so, like, yeah, Ghostbusters might be the one actually this year. But even that one's not a guarantee because it's facing a lot of social media issues right now because social media sucks, with people really ripping into things like, man, this doesn't feel like a Ghostbusters movie, which is honestly a lot of the feelings I had about the first one. So there's a little bit of me that has that like Schadenfreude, like watching people say these things and enjoying this misery that they're feeling because what's really funny is I again haven't really dug into to Afterlife because it was not something I wanted in my life, but there's this feeling at the end of that one that they were going back to the city and that we maybe going to actually get to tell like a quote unquote real Ghostbusters like story now that they were doing that. And then the previews for Frozen Empire have shown that it is once again a little bit bigger and wider and more adventurous than I think people expected from a Ghostbusters film. But this is getting into like all sorts of like, the movie's not even out yet and all of this stuff. But even that movie is facing a lot of problems right now with people who are trying to decide if they want to go to the movies or not, because they are having some feelings from some of the previews and some of the marketing that they've seen, right? Like that no movie is safe, I guess, is the big thing, right? No movie is a guarantee anymore. And that is scary as hell for everybody, for people that make movies for sure. But even as fans, there's a little something to the idea that like, I don't know what the movie landscape looks like 3 or 4 years from now. I know what it looks like for the next year or two, because there's so much stuff on the that they have made that they just need to get out the door.
Yeah.
I don't know after that, though. What comes after that?
Well, maybe not planning out, maybe not roadmaps, maybe a complete differing approach to how we talk about cinema, the way it used to be, where you didn't know a movie was coming out until you saw the trailer before the other movie you were going to see. I think entire careers are now made around this shit, right? I know.
This kind of happened in the beginning, in the early days of the internet, where you had your bloggers, you had your inside sources, you had your guys leaking stuff. But now there are entire careers in place. There are entire, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, part of your whole movie making process is dedicated to this idea of putting out a poster, hitting the circuit early, talking to the right blog posts online, getting interviewed by the right YouTubers, things like that, right? Like this is so built into the system of how movies get made now that if there's going to have to be a couple of really rough years. Like if we think we've had, and I think there are some people that hope, maybe more than think, but hope that we've had those years, that's what the strikes were about, that's what, dealing with COVID and all that was about, was Hollywood going through its hard times and now it can get back on its feet. But I don't think we've actually seen the hard times yet.
I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by the fear that I have as like a fan, is that we haven't seen how bad it's actually going to get yet. But there's going to be a couple of years down the line here that we just might not talk about movies for a bit, because it's just going to be too hurtful.
I mean, when I say if they're going to change it, what I'm really talking about is Disney plopping their dick on the table before Black Widow, being like, these are all the movies that are coming out for the next 5 to 6 years.
That's a good example, but there are other...
I know other people do that, but I mean, I think that like calling their shot for 5 years going forward, that sort of thing we're not going to see. We even talked about on the show how hubristic that looked, being like, these are what it is. And then as soon as it shifted, as soon as that became essentially a dead link to an outdated timeline, how ridiculous it made Disney look. To be like so assertive that these are the movies and this is when they're coming out. Like, that is what needs to die in Hollywood. That is specifically a discussion about marketing. But like that whole plan your freaking Marvel excursions through 2026, that was a foolish thing to do. And right now in 2024, we're really seeing those chickens come home to hatch. And it's not just because the movies were delayed. It's because of everything that happened with Jonathan Majors, everything that, like, the reaction to Quantumania, and the fact that people are not interested in going to see Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, which has just gotten a name change. It's like the market moves and shifts so quickly that to like try to build yourself out 5-6 years going forward, you're just tempting fate.
Even on a smaller scale, though, this is exactly the problem that we talked about with Madame Web and Sony, and the promises that they had kind of made about what they wanted to do with their universe, and how actually, if they had just never really talked about it like that and just made movies like Venom, Craven, Morbius is the one that actually came out, like, so, and Madame Web, right? Like, if they had not pushed this idea that they were going to try and create this connected universe, Spider-Man-less connected Spider-Man universe, like this whole like side of that story that really kind of becomes this cudgel that people use to beat up on these films because they're just like, these movies aren't making sense. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like trying to take. I mean, if I sat around and tried to take like The Rocketeer, The Shadow, and The Phantom from the '90s and say that, like, okay, now how do all these movies work together? And then I'm like, oh, well, these movies are all terrible because they don't work together as a trilogy. That's the wildest way to critique an individual film, right? But they open the door to that when they say things like, we are going to do our own universe, and we're gonna do a Sinister Six film since eventually, and like all of these rumors that they start, or if they don't start, they sure as hell don't stop. They don't go out there to say like, whoa, 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 like we're not gonna go that deep yet. We just want to see how that. We never heard any of that. They were so happy to let that be the story of what Sony was doing, because they figured they could get in on that universe building money that Marvel was getting, and even DC was getting, despite some of the more harsher criticisms that DC Warner Brothers was receiving. They were still getting that bump, that push from people who were like, well, I want to at least see how this movie connects to the other ones, right? And even Sony let that happen, and look at what happened to Madame Web. Is like, man, if I didn't have to think about that film as connected to all these other movies, I might actually have something more. I might have had a more enjoyable experience with this film, which is not being said, right?
Right.
Like, it may not be the main criticism of that movie, but it is definitely part of the criticism of that movie.
I mean, as soon as it was set in 2003 instead of 2023, I'm like, this feels like it's just not going to be connected to anything. I mean, I never really went in with that. I want to see the connection when the connection is made. Conjecture of the connection just always seems to disappoint people. I'll look at Spider-Man 3, which is also not a great movie, but I feel like our group of friends, the people we went to go see that movie with, they were really crestfallen afterwards because they had built up this whole like ongoing world and what it would mean based purely on the trailers. And so they were disappointed because their expectations were not met by that film.
I mean, but what is marketing but that building of expectation? Like the second you have a preview, the second you have a poster, the second you have any piece of material out there, it is to get people talking like this and to be thinking like this, right? And like that is just how movies exist now, right? And have for 40 years, right? Like, this is like, you talk about a time in which you didn't really know a movie was coming out until you saw a preview, but even then you then had that idea that the preview you saw was like, okay, I am in on this movie. And if you saw a movie that didn't line up with what you assumed from the 3-minute preview you saw. Like if the 90-minute movie didn't line up with the 3 minutes that you saw and what you could say, like it rubbed people the wrong way. This has always been part of the formula. The problem is that they let that conjecture become the bigger part. Viral marketing became a real part of the whole system. And I think it's starting to eat itself. Like the second that we really focused more on the marketing than on the films themselves, there are movies out there where their ad campaigns are more memorable than the movies themselves. And like that's unfortunate. And that's the thing that probably has to get fixed. But people that aren't making these movies are going to have to come to terms with the fact that they're not going to engage with these films the same way. And I don't know how many people are going to be okay with that. I think that there's already a contingency of people that were like, I wasn't really a movie person, but everybody else around me was, so I started going to movies. But now that nobody's really into movies anymore, I don't have to do that. I don't think we ever get those people back at the movie theater, right? Like I have very specific friends in my life that weren't movie people but would go to movies with me because it's something that I like to do, or go to movies with me and other friends in the group that like movies, that now we just don't ask them. Because why, there was a time where it was like, you don't want to be left out of the conversation, right? Now we're not having those conversations. So if you don't want to go to the movie, you don't have to come to the movie, right? Like this is just the new reality that Hollywood needs to start to face. And to bring it back to what started this whole conversation, the way that they have been pushing all of these movies that have been sitting on shelves for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years that are finally coming out, they don't seem to be handling that well. The idea that there is just a good contingency of people out there that are just never going to go sit in a theater again.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I guess one more anecdotal thing and then we can move past it. We're going to talk about this movie probably next year in a very special episode, if not in a time capsule. Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde is a film that, because I was a trailer checker, I saw the trailer for like 1,000 times. I saw that Tim Daly, Sean Young, weird 90s reimagining of the classic novel. I saw that trailer a bunch and was like really interested in seeing that film. Had no idea that it ever released. It came out in 1995, hence why it'll be a next year thing. And then I didn't watch it until I got my job at Blockbuster in 2002, and I saw it on the shelf. So, like, yeah, marketing in the 90s was not perfect, because even though if you were inundated with something, that does not mean you knew when it was going to come out. Mm-hmm. So it is this very strange sort of situation that is going on there with the 90s, and marketing thinks that they fixed it. They think that they fixed it with let's make sure everybody knows how this film is going to end, right? Let's Sejan's Gambit, which that has come up so many times in conversations, watching trailers. I mean, specifically for The Beekeeper, because I've recommended The Beekeeper to almost every single person that I know. And not just because it's the #1 movie in the country, not just because they underbooked it in Australia until people went insane and demanded that they release it in more cinemas, but because I really liked The Beekeeper and I really want people to see The Beekeeper. And then people will watch the movie and then watch the trailer. I don't know why they're doing this, but they're doing it. And they all say, I can't believe that they did that Sejan's Gambit thing you guys are always talking about. And I'm like, yeah, right? It's kind of effed up.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing, is like, it happens so often we literally have a name for it.
Yeah, exactly. We had to give it a name because we kept seeing it. I mean, as funny as it was before Hercules the Thracian Wars, and Expendables 3, was that the one that it was before? Can't believe there are 4 Expendable movies. Yeah, it was the third one when they introduced the Youngbloods who are going to take over as the new Expendables.
That didn't end up happening in the 4th one, if I...
Right, yeah, I haven't seen the 4th one yet, but no, yeah. I'm pretty sure none of those Youngbloods are in the new one. But like, and you're like, that scene right there in the bar where they're all celebrating, that's the end of the movie. And you were right. and it has forever changed
To be
how I
fair, that's
watch
because
trailers.
that's how every Expendable
Yes,
movie
that's
ends.
how
I
every
could have
movie.
said that without even seeing the trailer. I could have told you that's how that movie was going to end.
But it was specifically you
Yeah,
zeroing in on it being shown in the trailer
yeah.
that really changed my brain chemistry. Well, not just you pointing it out and then being so spot on that every trailer I watch now, it's like, oh, well, that's the end of the movie. That's the scene right there. I hate Siegen. Let's hope that the movie we actually see erases this moment from our minds.
Oh, man.
And I will say this on Frozen Empire. I was not on board for Frozen Empire. That first trailer was kind of meh, right?
Yeah.
The trailer that I saw before Madam Web, I am so on board for Frozen Empire now. It's literally like they took almost every single complaint that I levied against that first movie and then went back to it. Now, I know that it isn't just for me that they did that, but if you see that second trailer and you know what my complaints were, you'll see, well, let's make sure that a bunch of that stuff we retconned with Afterlife now actually happens in this continuity, for better or for ill. Is really kind of crazy. I don't know if you've seen the second trailer, but like
I don't know. I have not seen much for Afterlife, but I have seen
not Afterlife. I mean Frozen
trailers.
Empire.
Sorry, Frozen Empire. I've not seen much for Frozen Empire, so I don't know. But maybe this is one of those ones where we'll have to do a deep dive on this stuff. I was so down on Afterlife that we never really kind of got too deep into it, other than just some very specific stuff in it.
Yep.
But maybe we'll have to do a revisit, and maybe my opinions will change depending on what happens with Afterlife.
Frozen
the
Empire
attitude,
again.
Whatever, the Afterlife continuity, I guess, is what we'll call it. Because the other part of this is that I still have issues with the ways, as much as a large part of my issues with this particular set of Ghostbusters films comes from the ways in which it just like pretty much exists just because they wanted to shit all over Answer the Call. Like, it was just like the entire thing was just built to just like be marketing wise, like everything was just about like, this is so not that movie. And it's like, this is a really weird way to go about this, guys. Like, why does every interview have to be about this? Why does every comment have to be, every preview mention this? Like, I don't know, this is really weird. And so, like, that really rubbed me the wrong way. But the other side of all of that is I had legitimate concerns about that movie and feelings about that movie because of, like, the ways in which I feel like it really isn't a Ghostbusters film because of the ways in which the blue-collar stuff is missing and all that. But, we've talked about this before. But maybe if there's going to be some good, juicy stuff in between these two films that allows me to see them on their own as opposed to connected to these other ones. I don't know. We'll have to go back
Siegen, I can assure you that is not the case. The connective tissue that is being built from Frozen Empire back to the first movie is what is making me very excited about it. So if you're hoping that these are going to connect themselves as their own pocket continuity, that's not going to happen. I'm sorry. And that's just a fact. This is officially the Ghostbusters cinematic continuity, which is
it's
crazy
not that
to say.
it's not that the continuity will be any different, but if there's a way in which you can view the style, right? Because they can do as much story continuity as they want, but my issue specifically with Afterlife that I'm talking about is the idea that stylistically it was just not a Ghostbusters.
I agree.
Right. And so if Frozen Empire is able to continue that stylistic world of this while talking about Ghostbusters lore, that's great. Then maybe that will be the thing that allows me to come into it, is that they are still going to talk about Ghostbusters lore, but this is, it's the reboot requel, like,
it's the reboot requel sequel,
right? but that idea that like we are going to still connect to this old world that you know and love. We're going to play by certain rules that you're aware of, but we're going to introduce some of our own. We're going to do something different. Sometimes that works for me, sometimes that doesn't. Just like everybody, right? There are certain versions of this that some people are like turn their nose up at because it offends them. This might be mine. It sounds like it is. So, but maybe this one will bring me back around. But I just don't know. I don't know if there's any way for me to get excited about this film before this film.
I don't, and
Right.
honestly, I was right there with you. I was so meh about it. What we had set down was if we are able to see this in laser, then we will go see it. That was the like fate is in control. If something else is more worthy of being in the laser projection theater than Ghostbusters, we're not going to go see the movie. Like, that's just how we determined it. That's how I determine a lot of film things these days. If I can't see it in the best possible fidelity in the theater, I'm not going to bother. I'm just, that's just how I'm approaching it. And then we had put that down on paper. Seeing the second trailer before Madam Web, I'm like, well, now I'm actually exciting and rooting for it to be in laser projection. Where before it's like, if I don't see it, I don't see it. But that second trailer, I don't want to say anything about it. You haven't seen it, and I don't want to blow it up, but it does things and it shows things that should have been in existence and referenced in Afterlife, as far as I'm concerned. And that's one of the big things, aside from puppeting the corpse of a person who is deceased, right? Which we've talked about enough, and I will say it enough.
Specific complaints that we had about that first movie, right? Like I felt like it really wasn't stylistically in the same universe as those first two films, and they, as far as I was concerned, disrespected a lot of the people involved with those films because of what they do in that movie. Not everybody agrees with both of those points, and
Right.
which is why it has the fan base that it does. But I can't help the way that I feel about that shit. Like I just don't love it.
And it's completely understandable. Even having never seen it, I understand. I've seen it the one time, and I'm like, maybe I'll rewatch it. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna rewatch it. There are so many like issues with that film just as a movie that like I can't grok with. It is disappointing. It really is.
And I think that that's really just like this is the kind of thing that I think people are really going to need to come around on. Either we're all going to have to come to terms with the fact that not every movie is going to be the best movie ever made. We have gotten way too caught up in this attitude that like if this movie is not 10 times better than the last one, then it is a failure. There's no in between. We've got to stop that shit, like as audience members. And the other side of that is that we also have to come to terms with the fact that we don't have to see every movie. And this is something you and I have been
we've been trumpeting this for a while.
Right. I mean, like, it started really for us with, like, the Oscars, right? And that idea that, like, yeah, you might not get to see every movie on the Oscars list, and that's okay. And, like, starting from, like, building out from there, this idea that, like, man, that's kind of just the, like, all movie, like, whether it's award worthy or not, or talked about or not, like, we need to just kind of cool it with this idea that like if you're not seeing every movie then you're not allowed to be in this conversation kind of thing that I'm putting very specific words out there that that people are not really saying, but that is definitely the attitude that was prevalent pre-COVID, right?
Oh, I mean, I was guilty of it myself. It's one of the reasons why I started that coping mechanism of like, okay, I've seen every Best Picture nominee. I've seen every like director nominee. It's okay that the one foreign film that hasn't been released wide in America yet, I haven't managed to track down and watch. Right. It was, and then those it's okay that I didn't see this adapted screenplay film that the closest theater that was showing it was 4 hours away. Like I had already gotten to that point. And then that one year I didn't watch the Oscars to do something else, I kind of felt free afterwards. I'll admit that. Like I was putting this expectation, this drive, this desire on myself that was unnecessary for me to enjoy that award show. Yeah. And I'm really happy that I did kind of free myself, but then it has extended to, I mean, before the pandemic, we would see 3 movies a week. That is something that Dale and I would do. We had the AMC A-List Stubs Plus whatever program that allowed you to see 3 movies a week, including repeats. You could go see a movie you had already seen, which was why we saw Suicide Squad as many times as we did, because stuff was just not coming out in 2020. So we saw Suicide Squad as like connective tissue to get from like the 4:00 movie to the 10:00 movie, and not just be sitting around. Right? Yeah, exactly. But like to go from, I mean, that started slow in like 2014, where I'm like, I'm going to make sure I see 52 movies in theaters, so it breaks down to one movie a week. And then that eventually ballooning up to 200 new movies in theaters, and then being like, there has to be a better way.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, like this is from the fan side. There's clearly also stuff that's going to have to change on the movie making side of things. We know that. I mean, we sat through 2 strikes this past year because of that exact idea. The whole system is going to have to get upended and changed, and it's not going to be pretty. Like, I don't know what 2026 looks like. I don't know what 2027 looks like. I got a pretty good idea of what 2024 looks like in terms of what's going to come out, and even a little bit of 2025. But generally, like, beyond 2025, for the first time in the last 10, 15 years, there isn't like this big thing that we're all talking about being 2 or 3 years out, which is interesting. It's not like I don't know. It's not like it was always like this, like you've said. Like we there was a time where it wasn't like this, but I don't know how we go back to that, and I don't think we should go back to that. I think it has to be something else, something even more. We'll see. Well, I mean, I don't think Hollywood's going away. I don't think that they're going to stop making movies, right? So the question is, what will they do? And I honestly don't know.
I mean, I'm right there with you. And I'll even admit, 2024, as set as it is, I am being surprised by new release dates almost every day. Where I'm like...
Specific dates, yeah, I will give you that. But there's a lot of stuff that it's just, I was waiting for this date to come eventually. You know what I mean? Like I'm not surprised. Like, there hasn't been a movie that I have seen announced coming sometime in the next 2 or 3 months that I didn't already know existed, right? There's no big like surprises so far.
I mean, the big one for me was The Crow, and that was, we were discussing there's supposed to be a Crow movie coming out, and then to wake up to it's coming out in June, and I'm like, oh, okay. That feels crazy. Borderlands, Dale thinking that it was a huge hoax because they've been talking about a Borderlands movie for so long, and then lo and behold, you're sending it text messages and I'm seeing trailers drop. Like, It just suddenly became a real thing and that's the other thing, until you have that tangible, quantifiable, I can sort of touch it with my eyeballs thing in existence, it's hard to believe anything that Hollywood says. Even before, in the time we're like, oh, we know that Infinity War is coming in 3 years, until we saw that first trailer or that first poster, it still was kind of conjecture that, like, Disney wasn't denying. And then also, we have things like Benedict Cumberbatch isn't Khan. Why the fuck would he be Khan? And then you know who Benedict Cumberbatch was in Star Trek Into Darkness, right?
Yeah.
He was Khan, right? Like, so you really can't... Hollywood has not done a lot to trust build with us as consumers.
Oh, not at all. Right?
And so it's not surprising that acting this way is going to beget this outcome.
I mean, even in terms of just quality, like making quality film, like the ways in which they have kind of like movie studios, the industry has really started to lean on crutches and dependable incoming cash because, we talk about the ways in which you can watch a movie in the 90s and see the structure of it, and it feels like it's kind of like playing Mad Libs sometimes, and they just use the same the same skeleton for every other movie and all that. But
I need a profession and a sport, Sejan.
I mean, so basketball is definitely your sport, and then the profession is like multi-million-dollar high-end building architect, right? It's like, oh, well, Matthew McConaughey will gladly play this role.
Borden Lambe is $1 million architect, but due to trouble with the law, now he's coaching church youth organization basketball.
Yeah. But like that idea we didn't get away from that. I don't.
No,
People
we
talk about
didn't.
that like that. Like we talk about that like it's a thing from the past. But like we never got away from that. In fact, we have kind of gotten into worse habits as like creators and filmmakers and consumers abound. We have all kind of just let this thing just kind of fester. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Which, while we're talking about everything old being new again,
Yeah.
I asked you to do something this week because a demo dropped. Did you get to put your hands on Contra Operation Galuga?
Yeah, Devin, I believe they're just calling it Galaga. Everybody I've heard talk about it, first of all. Secondly, I'm not good at Contra. Never was, still ain't.
Well, I think that they've done a lot with Operation Galuga to make people, to give people a fighting chance. I don't think everybody's going in the way I did, where I'm like, hard one hit kill. Thank you very much. I
Yeah,
wanted to be Contra when I was a kid.
there was a Nintendo Direct. They announced a new Contra and basically were like, demo out now. And so that's what we did this week. We checked out the demo for the new Contra. I'm gonna give my immediate first impression right now
Please
before
do.
we get too deep into this. I had a good time with it. Like as much as I am not good at Contra and definitely felt a little frustrated, not at the experience of the game, just at my own inabilities to play Contra, right? I had more fun with this Contra than I have had with a Contra game in a long time, and it was only the demo, right? So I'm very much looking forward to the release of it. I don't know if I will be the market, I don't know if I will be the audience for that, so I don't know if I'll be the one to purchase it, but you better believe that I want to get in on it with somebody. So, like, if a friend has it and we could do some couch co-op, or if there's some way to do online without me having to purchase the game, but I don't know if that'll work.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, but
so
yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed my time with the demo. To then find out that there seems to be a little bit of a pushback on it, shall we say, was actually kind of surprising to me, but I guess not too surprising nowadays.
yeah. Well, so the interesting thing is you say that it was announced. Maybe it's because I'm follow Wayforward from River City Girls and Shantae days. They announced this back in like November, December of 2023. So this was like sort of their big one to like people who aren't following game news all the time. Which is also interesting because two of the games that released after that Nintendo Direct partner showcase, Penny's Big Adventure and the Pony Card racing game, they were considered stealth releases. And I'm like, that's interesting because they definitely did a 30-minute presentation that told you they were coming out. Like, what do you mean stealth release? Same day announce releases? But like, to stealth release would be if they were out and then you didn't know about them until you were told about them. It's just the terms of marketing, right? We're looking at marketing this week. But so Galuga, honestly, I looked away for a second and completely missed that it was featured in the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. I had no idea that it was finally there. I got from Wayforward, like on Twitter and the social medias. I got an email because I follow like one of their lists, and it's like the Operation Galuga demo is available now. So I played it initially on my PS5 with my fight stick, so it felt like a real arcade thing, and I had a blast with it, despite the fact that the game is ugly as sin. The game looks gross. And
Yeah,
that,
I
and
don't
that,
know. I don't mind it. I don't think it's the best looking game I've ever looked at, but I also, again, I don't have this like deep connection or love for Contra, so it's not like some of the complaints about the graphics that have come out are things just like the ways other Contras have looked and what they've done with character designs and stuff. I don't have any connection to that. So maybe it's like a in the grand scheme of Contra, it looks that way. I think in general, it's got a pretty good look to it. I actually really like the 2.5 look, the camera move. There's a moment where you're fighting the boss there with like all of the guns, the gun wall and all that,
mhm.
where the camera turns slightly and like you get a little bit of that like 3D effect, like almost like if this was a 3DS game, you'd literally be able to like look behind things. And I I don't know. I thought that was really cool, but maybe I'm just a sucker for that
No,
shit
no,
or something.
I think the reason why, I don't know. First of all, despite the game looking like garbage, I have a friend who has just recently quit his job to try to develop a game. And I support him. I think it's really cool that he's doing that. But he asked me what I look for in a game, and I'm like, dude, it needs to be a fun game. The game needs to be enjoyable. Don't be one of these people who is so obsessed with the aesthetics of the game and the design of the game, that like what the characters actually look like, that you forget to put a good game in there, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like that happens a lot. Sometimes with indie stuff, sometimes with AAA stuff. We were so obsessed with making sure the game looked good that like we just made a game where you just hit the square button until the fight's over.
My only caveat to that would be it depends on the kind of game you want to make, because I mean there are also people out there that are perfectly happy with visual novel style games. Right. Like that's a genre unto itself that they like. So I mean, like if you set out to make an action game that is something like Contra and it turns into just a bunch of stuff like press square at the right time in order to move past this, then yeah, that's disappointing. But on the other hand, if you are going out of your way to make that kind of visual novel game and that's what you want, that's what you want. But it is the only caveat I would just put on this whole idea of like, it depends on what you are hoping to your audience to get out of the game. If you are a person that is all about that with the art and that's what you want people to get out of it, then by all means make that. You might have a little bit more of a niche audience in that regard, but like you could still make that game. The problem is when you have these AAA titles where they spend $300 million to make this game, and then they spend all this time showing you how cool the cutscenes look, but then when it comes time to gameplay, it's shit. Like that is definitely a problem. Like I don't want to dismiss that. You are totally right. Like you need to make sure that you are making the game you actually want to make. I think there are some people that for them that is an artistic experience.
Right.
Not every game should be that, can be that. But there is a place in this world for those kinds of games. If that's not what you're trying to make, though, like if that is not your goal from day one, then you got to be careful that you don't fall into that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I'm not even like thinking about like visual novels when you think of it, but like from visual novels or click and point games that I have played, right? Like if it's a point and click game, right, to kind of tell a visual story, and you know you got great looking pixel art, you got great looking sprites and everything like that. If your UI to interact with the world is not good, I'm gonna say it, Thimbleweed Park was very disappointing in terms of how it like tried to emulate the Scum engine and then like kind of didn't, in a way that was like uncanny valley for someone coming from growing up playing those style of games to try to play the new version of it. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the same sort of thing I'm talking about. It really looks like it's a point and click adventure game from the 80s and 90s, but the gameplay is unsatisfying. And the reason I bring it up, not just to say that I had that conversation with somebody right before playing the demo, but also I played the demo to death. I used every character. I experimented with all of the like perks that each character has. I went out and I made sure to get the level 2 of every weapon so that I could discuss with like some knowledge how all of them work. And
we're back on Contra, right?
We're back on Contra, yeah. We're back on Operation Galuga. All of that. But what I kept saying to myself is, this is a fun game. I enjoy playing this game. I do not like these visuals. And that's just the thing. It's not going to stop me from buying the game. The visuals alone, when I saw them back in 2023, my question was, I don't know if I'm going to buy this game for $40. But then, after playing it the way that I have on the demo, I know for a fact I have to get it day one because I don't want this game spoiled for me. Like, that's the level it's got to with me. And
there's definitely like for anybody that hasn't seen it, just there's a little bit of like it's not full on Pixar, but there's a little bit of CalArts style cartooniness to the character designs. And the world has a lot of color, but the color palette is pretty limited. right? Like I wouldn't call it like a brown game. Like, it's
No, it's
not
not
like
a brown
play
game. Yeah.
right. Like there is definitely color in the world, but I will say and the demo is only a small portion of the game.
It's the
But
first level.
from what's in there, it's not very varied. So like as pretty as some of the colors may be individually, there is a moment where you're like standing there looking at a screen going like I can't differentiate between foreground and background for this moment because of things like that, like color and stuff. So there are definitely moments like that. And then like in terms of performance, there's a bunch of weird stuff to be said about like they push this, at least the way that it was brought to me, not just through you but through Nintendo, on the Switch, a system that is not known to be that a powerhouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with that, there's been a lot of stuff about how hitchy it can be on the Switch, and like, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. I also didn't really experience too much of that. I don't know. People have been talking about like frame rate issues and things like that, and I didn't pick up on that. I will say that like the kind of aesthetic that they go with to like not have connecting animations between like moving around and stuff is a choice that I don't think you can blame the Switch for. Like I don't know. There's some critiques going around about the look and feel of the game that I didn't experience when I played it. I didn't think it looked that bad. I thought it played great. Like I thought it felt great control wise. But there are people out there complaining about it being stuttery. There are people complaining about it being floaty. That they're not getting inputs all the time that they think they're putting in. I mean, honestly, a lot of that stuff sounds like me complaining about how I can't play Contra. Like, I swear I ducked. I swear, it's just not ducking. I don't know what's wrong. My controller's broken.
I mean, along that, it is also a demo, right? And I would not be surprised if from this demo, they go in and they identify problems and fix it. There's clear hitbox issues. A person ducking and a bullet going over their head and killing them because the hitbox either extends too high despite you being ducked. Like, that's a thing that I have seen. I've seen many videos demonstrating that hitbox issue. Also, going from the PS5 to the Switch, I noticed a severe lack of responsiveness to the controls.
On the Switch, you mean?
Yeah, on the Switch version.
Yeah. Well, and again, I like that's the other that is the bigger, I think, piece of this puzzle that we don't really have, since we don't have the whole puzzle put together yet. We don't know how big this piece really is, but it feels like it's one of the big ones. Is that idea that I don't know why they pushed for this to be connected to the Switch as much as they have. I like the idea that it's available on the Switch, great, but the ways in which it feels like it's been kind of pushed, like this is the intended experience for this game, feels a little weird. Because for what Contra needs to be, the tightness that a true Contra experience requires in control and in frame rate and in like all of that stuff, why would you not be pushing a more powerful system? Honestly, straight up, I just think like all I could think as I was playing on the Switch is I might want to play this more on the PC, right? Like any kind of issues I was running into, and again, I didn't feel like I ran into anything that was like game breaking in the way that some people have talked about it, but like any moment I had where I was like, I bet this would be a little bit smoother if I was playing on a PC. And so every moment of it to me was like, this is going to be a PC experience. I mean, like, I'll be honest, I thought this was going to be an Xbox exclusive. When I first heard that they were making a Contra game, I didn't know about the Wayforward connection to it. I didn't know about any of that stuff. I had a pretty solid thought in my head, I don't know where it came from, that this was going to be one of those Game Pass exclusive games for a while, eventually coming to PS5 or whatever the next PlayStation is, because we're already talking about that now, and eventually coming to the Switch, eventually coming to the PC and all that, or if not, or same day as Xbox with the PC, but as usual we don't talk about the PC, right? Like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's strange that you say that, because for a long time, when I initially caught wind of it, it was a Nintendo Switch exclusive to be released on other platforms later on. So I think the big push is that they had that partner deal, that exclusivity to the Nintendo Switch, and then for whatever reason, it has now opened up to March 12th is going to be the release date on every single platform. And that was the most surprising thing about this week. Because I was like, one of the other reasons I wrote it off is like, it doesn't look great, and that might just because it's on the Switch, right? And then, no, we have a demo on every possible way to play it. And I played it PlayStation 5 and Switch. I was going to do it on my PC, but something else that we'll talk about. I got a little delayed in another project I was doing. That's actually why I was 10 minutes late to record today. Because I started late and whatever. But then to play it on the PlayStation 5, I'm like, wow, these are really responsive controls. I'm going to try it on the Switch. And I'm like, these are not as responsive. I think I understand why this is no longer a timed Switch exclusive. Because they would have just like cannibalized their audience right there by like that. No one's going to give this game the time of day. And that's happened so often to Konami with release exclusives, where because whatever they chose to release it on was not the best version of that game, the game has failed to catch on.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to hear what people feel once the full game comes out, because that you said it before, it is just a demo, right? There's a lot that we are seeing and talking about and hearing right now that could be fixed by release. I think the other thing is like, we don't talk about this enough, but like by the time we as an audience, as a video game audience, get a hold of a demo of any kind, like that's not the game that they even have behind the scenes, right? So like there's also things like there's definitely something to be said about how we put this demo out. People are having this kind of concern. Let's go and address that before we release the game. There's definitely stories of that happening. We know that does happen. But there is also something to the idea that this could also be stuff that's already been like addressed, like they're aware, right? And we're never gonna know what's going on behind the scenes truly, right? And not unless we get some like Double Fine style like 16-piece documentary about the making of this game, and that's not ever gonna happen, right?
No.
But like this idea that things like the tighter controls, things like some of the hitchiness on the Switch and stuff, like, yeah, they could go and fix it, or hell, for all we know, they already have. And this is just the demo build of this. It just happens to run in this way. So like there is also something to keep in mind in that. The important thing to remember, though, is that at the end of the day, no matter what, this is what they chose to put in front of people's eyeballs right now. So whether they have fixed these things, will fix these things, blah, 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 they banked on this being the thing that people would get their hands on and get hungry for the rest of the game. And I don't see that happening, and that's unfortunate because of the fun that I did have with it. I think that there is definitely fun to be had with this game. And I think when it comes out, I will have some very fun experiences with it. Will I play it for the rest of my life? Will it be the thing that replaces Apex Legends for people? Will it be the thing that replaces Fortnite? No. It's not that kind of game. But this idea that people are just like, yeah, I need to get it this way, and I'll have to do online because I live by myself, so like couch co-op means nothing to me and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, weird. These are very weird criticisms that people are levying against a one level demo of a game that we don't have yet.
Right, and that demo could be the most current build, or based on Steam releases, there could be a build that's 16 revisions past it.
Right, exactly.
That we don't get our hands on. You're not wrong about that. If we look at other games that they've done, I'm going to use River City Girls 2. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but it is demonstrative of a lot of the complaints that people have about this particular game. When that game initially released, it was only 2-player, despite saying it was going to be a 4-player experience. And then eventually, they added online co-op for that game. Did it come almost a year after release and was a legitimate stealth release? Yes. But they did get the game out to people so that people could play it, and then did not stop working on it until it was in, let's say, a more modern state where it has online co-op and things like that. So, Wayforward, the way that they do it, there's still a chance that we're going to have co-op. Might not be till March 2025, but I wouldn't be surprised the way that... I mean, did you play story mode or arcade mode? Is what I'm. I just
played arcade mode.
Okay, I think they probably should have released this demo as just arcade mode, because arcade mode I think gives a better feeling for. If you just play the story mode, you only can play as Bill or Lance. On arcade mode, You can play as Bill, Lance, Ariana, the new
there's all 5 of
character,
them.
or the Probotectors, which
Yeah.
are just, robot versions of Bill and Lance. But still, you can play 5 different characters. And I will say, Ariana, her weapons are different. Like the C weapon, the cluster bomb, is actually like a grenade. She launches grenades, and they don't evolve to be, black holes the way that it does for the other 4 characters. Also, the arcade mode is the mode where you can play up to 4 people co-op, which I think would be insanity for this game, right? It's already hard enough playing with 2 people. As the person who's beaten the first, 3 games on co-op with my friends, and like friendships live and die by Contra co-op. Let's just be honest about it. But that arcade mode is just such a better demonstration of what the game can be, as opposed to the story mode, which just felt like hyper limited. And yeah, you're going to play through the story mode at least once, probably to unlock a character or this, that, and the other. But it's weird that in a demo version, you would give the option. Like, usually a demo is bare bones.
My big thing is demo. If I'm given the option to just have a gameplay experience with a demo, that's what I will always choose. Because if you give me the story demo, and only a story demo, I'll still try it, but there is always going to be this feeling of just like, oh man, I know this isn't going to end, right? This happens a lot more with indie games than it does with AAA stuff and AAA demos, but this idea that because with indie games, you almost don't have a guarantee the game is ever going to come out, right? Like, I don't tend to get that deep into, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like alpha builds and beta builds and all that sort of stuff. Like,
pre-release. I hate pre-release. Early access, all that stuff.
Yeah, like I don't tend to get too deep into that stuff, but like if a game has a solid demo, I did this recently, I think I even talked about it on the show with My Friendly Neighborhood, which is the one that was like the Resident Evil style one that has the whole Sesame Street vibe to it. There was a demo that was out that was super robust and like straight up allowed you to break the game. Like it encourages you to to basically turn on God mode at some point and just kind of just explore the world, because it's more about wanting to introduce you to what the world can be. And it's a phenomenal demo. I love that. There is definitely some story stuff in it that you have to kind of get through in order to unlock those kinds of other abilities, free cam and no damage modes and stuff like that. But eventually you get to this point where you can just kind of just walk around this demo and just see how things are built. You could literally go behind the scenes on stuff. And it's really cool. And it's a really great way to do that demo. I played the story stuff as long as I had to in order to get to that stuff, but then beyond that, I haven't gone back to the story stuff in that demo. I have actually more than once gone back to the demo mode of that game to do the free cam stuff and things like that, because it's just so cool. And there's no promise, right? There's no promise that's not being fulfilled in the arcade mode. I didn't want to touch the story mode for Contra yet because I know that there's going to be a full game that comes out that I might get the potential. I potentially might get the chance. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna that story, right?
I'll play the story and then I will go arcading for any other like trophies or things to pick up. Right. I don't know. Like, I'm excited about it. I mean, my complaint, and this is strange compared to everything, is the one-hit kill mode does not feel like its own mode. The game is very calibrated to having a like life meter for the characters you're playing as, and that's demonstrated for it. And I went back to it. Human enemies tend to die in one hit in that first level of Contra, where it is a one-hit kill sort of situation. So when you're playing one-hit kill and a standard guy is going to take 3-4 hits before he dies, there's an imbalance there, and that was disappointing. And specifically, the difference between easy, normal, and hard mode is how many lives you start with and where your checkpoints are. So, playing on hard mode, one-hit kill, you get taken back to the very beginning of the level. And honestly, that's how I've played Contra for most of my life. So I'm not going to be too disappointed by that. But then, when I have to shoot a guy 3-4 times, where in the intro levels of Contra, everything is kind of a one-hit kill as well, So like it feels sort of balanced, and then once the aliens and spaceships show up, you're like, oh, now I understand why things are stronger than us. It like
Well,
makes
it makes you
sense.
makes
Yeah.
you really wonder what the later levels will be like if this is what the first level is like, right?
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know. I don't know the balance on that. Like, obviously, there's going to be a contingency of Contra people who want a one-hit death system, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your Metal Slug, right? There's a reason why Metal Slug went with it, and all of the Contra games tend to do that. Like, I don't think life bars were added to Contra until they went to the third dimension. You can correct me if I'm wrong. In fact, I think I am wrong. I think Rogue Core on Sega Genesis, there were characters who had life bars, but again, there's also a character who doesn't, and that's who I tend to play as. So I don't know. I don't have my memories are with
The Contra has always welcomed tryhards, shall we say?
yes, that is the get good mentality starts with something like Contra.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean you can put in the Konami code, or you can try to get through the game with 3 lives. And it's up to you when you get there. Also,
have you tried putting it into the demo?
I haven't, and the big reason for that is because I haven't played on anything that have AB long enough. Like I just wanted to do the Switch. I wanted to try it to see if I noticed anything noticeable, and I did. Like I noticed that slowdown, that jankiness, and I'm like, okay, that's a little unfortunate. So
Yeah.
I do owe those levels to try to put in the Konami code, because that'd be weird if they didn't have it in there in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah,
like,
my bigger thing was did they put it in the demo? Like it has to be in the main game eventually for some reason, but did they
yeah,
put it in the demo?
yeah. I mean,
Even if it just unlocks like a silly costume or something if you put it
yeah,
on.
or a character or something like that, or if it just gives you the 30 lives, that'd be interesting. Like,
Yeah.
so we'll try that and we'll report back next time. I can't believe I thought it but never did it, and yeah. That's us. That's all bad. But really, I played it, and I played it to death. I played so much of the demo on PS5. I mean, my run through on Switch was way better than any of my run throughs on PS5 because I now know the level.
Right.
And that was interesting. But I mean, I don't know. I'm happy about the game now. Where before I was like, this kind of looks gross to me. I don't know if it's going to be worth my time. I can say that it is fun to play, even if the graphics are not my favorite part of the game.
Yeah, I definitely want to keep playing it. I don't think it's going to be a game that I play on my own though, and I don't know. So because of that, I don't think I'm going to necessarily be the one to pick it up. But if I end up at a house where they say, "Hey, I got the new Contra, do you want to check it out?" Like I'm going to jump on that.
Yes. So if you're one of Sejin's friends and you're buying Contra, guaranteed hangout session with Sejin right there, right? Go grab him, make him do it.
Hey man, I never bought a Wii. The entire lifetime of the Wii, I loved so many games on that, and I never played one on my own system. They were always other people, whether it was coming home from college and hanging out with Zach and playing on his system, or hanging out with you guys. There are so many great memories I have of the Wii, and I never owned one. So there's very much potential for me to have fond memories of Contra, despite never being the one to purchase it.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're not someone who has that nostalgia, I would understand why this new Contra would not work for you. The reason that we're having these complaints that we're having is from people who've played Contra probably for the last 30 or so years.
Right.
And even Contra itself has a weird history, because like the arcade game wasn't anything to write home about. It was the NES version that really got people excited about the game.
Which definitely like made me rethink the whole like Switch relationship, right? Like the idea that this is kind of the Nintendo game, right? Not the, but Contra lives in the Nintendo canon, right? And because of that, and so like this idea that they would be pushing the Switch version, that they would have been Switch exclusive if the other things had not worked out, right? Like this, that I get that, but looking at the reality of 2024, and even as somebody that thinks the Switch might be my personal favorite system that's out right now, I can still admit that if I'm making a technically needy game, like the Switch is not the system I would aim for, right?
Yeah. And then also, it's so big into the Nintendo canon that starting with Contra, even though you have the Konami code to give you those 30 lives, Contra is one of those ones that was made Nintendo hard when they came from Japan to America. Super C, if you've never finished Super C, I don't blame you for that. It's a very difficult game. The Konami code only gives you 10 lives instead of 30, but also Nintendo said when it came to America, limit the amount of continues. So that's the thing. Play the Japanese version, you could continue forever. Most famously, I love Contra 3, The Alien Wars. I think that was my introduction to Contra. When my mother saw that I was playing Contra, she's like, I remember when we bought this for you on the Super Nintendo, and you kind of went crazy when you found out you had to beat it on hard mode, but damn it, you beat it on hard mode. Like, that was the story that was talked about in the house.
Oh yeah, I mean, you want to talk about Nintendo Hard, right? Like that idea of locking true endings behind the hardest mode and things like that. It definitely is in that vein.
Right. And that is not the case for the Japanese version of Contra 3, where if you beat it on easy mode, you get to play and fight every boss and see the true ending. So that's why whenever I recommend those, I recommend playing the Japanese version, because it's all visual storytelling anyway. Plus, it's a really, really good translation if you are someone who wants to see it in English. So that, I mean, it's just one of those things where I've played them all now, and I will recommend play the Japanese version, right? We're not in a time where, oh, you only have 3 continues because we don't want you to beat it in a rental period, right? Play it like that. You have unlimited continues. It's like being in the arcade. So, I don't know. It feels real. I don't... Whatever. It's why I'm not real bothered by, like... As much as I did want to beat it with a one-hit kill playthrough, and I eventually did it, I think I died like 79 times. So, again, this is when I was learning the game. And maybe... I mean, like, I can get through the first 4 levels of Metal Slug now without dying. As my mother will say, the worst quarter she ever gifted me was when she had to sit and watch me play 4 levels of Metal Slug. You get 1 quarter, Devin. Okay. Half an hour later. But yeah, so I'm excited about it. I was not excited before the demo. And I do hope that a lot of these issues that are cropping up, that there is video evidence of. Seriously, that one where they're ducked and the bullet flies over their head so they think they're safe and then they get killed. And it's not because they stood up. It's not because they moved. It is literally the hitbox for some reason is on a higher plane than they're on. I felt for that person. I don't know if I would have made the angry video yelling at Wayforward to fix the game that they did, but I did feel for that, and it made me rethink some of my deaths where I'm like, why did I die there?
Yeah. You know what, though? I mean, just to kind of connect this to the conversations we were having about the movie stuff, like, the fandoms have got to start calming the fuck down. You know, like I have always been this huge kind of proponent of the idea that, like, these various industries kind of all go through the same phases eventually, sometimes a little bit faster than the previous ones. So, like, video games have gone through the same phases that movies did, right? And the ways in which we are seeing what's going on in film today, I know that the makers, the creators, the studios are definitely part of the problem, but there's also a large part of the problem with audiences and the way that audiences interact with film and the ways in which they expect certain things from film, and when they don't get what they expect, behave certain ways. There are problems there. I don't think anybody would argue with that. And video games has that same issue. Like gaming has that same issue. The ways in which people, like, this is a freaking demo. Now is not the time to make your 30-minute rant demanding that Wayforward listen to your demands. Like, yes, on the one hand, there is this idea that this is the time where they can make major fixes and changes, and making sure the community vocalizes its concern with certain things is definitely, you know, like, part of this process. But I don't think it needs to be wrapped up in an angry, like, video on YouTube. That's like there are ways to go about this that are not that. But people, you know, people are first of all, they believe that if they aren't the loudest, they aren't listened to, which is somewhat true. But like also on top of that, this is just the way people interact with these games right now. And we got to change that. This cannot be the way that people take in this stuff and interact with developers and games, and because all it does is then turn developers off from wanting to listen to their audiences. Look at some of the larger audiences over the last few years that have been tried to be more transparent with their fan bases, and it's bit them in the ass in a lot of stories. Sometimes it's worked out really well, but in other places, we've seen a lot of studios actually step back from being so transparent, step back from being so interactive with their audiences because their audiences have not been great.
Yeah. What I will say is I prefer to be a unpaid beta tester on a demo than a unpaid beta tester on a $40 to $70 game. So
Yeah.
this demo coming out and people noticing some of these issues, again, issues that may have already been dealt with prior to when this demo was submitted to Nintendo for approval. Understanding that like that's just the nature of games. Understanding that Momodora 5 had 16 updates in the 24 hours it was first released, right? The way that Steam has sort of affected how like released games are modified and patched in the early days. All of that into it. If you don't have to make that 30-minute yelling video like Wayforward, what the fuck, right? But like sending an email to their support being like, hey, I was playing the demo and I noticed this. That's fine.
Or
Like,
even making videos and pulling communities together, going onto Discord channels and things like that. Like there's a way to do those exact things and not be an asshole.
yeah, you
Right.
can be
And like that's what
respectful.
we're talking
Yeah.
about. Right. Like there's a way to do this stuff and be respectful. And I'm sure that there are videos out there of people being respectful. It's just that there is always going to be that contingency right now because of the ways that we, as a society know how to interact with these things. It feels like we are always going to have this contingency of fans for whether it's for movies, television, for God, let's not even talk about everything that's going on with the renewal of uh True Detective and like some feelings that people have put out there about like straight up apology videos on YouTube of people saying I'm sorry for hate watching this season. I feel like I'm the reason we're now going to have this creator for the next two because they re-signed on the creator for this season for a couple more. I mean, and why wouldn't they? It was their highest rated season of the show and things like that. And so there's this weird reaction there, right? So like television fan bases, movie fan bases, video game fan bases, we are just always going to have to deal with this contingency of assholes, and we have kind of started to give them more power than we should.
Well said, Sijin. And also kind of terrifying in just a truly transparent matter. The fact that because they are the loudest voices, because they have the biggest echo chambers, though I think a smaller echo chamber would echo louder, they are the ones that are listened, and they're the ones that Hollywood, to go back to the Hollywood of it all, are rewarding, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we would be able to gaslight Sony into re-releasing Madam Web the way that a contingency on the internet did with Morbius.
They
But
did it once.
it doesn't change the fact that they do have like there are just so many feathers in the hats of the like minority voices or the not minority voices that sounds wrong, of like the people who are just yelling the loudest even though there's
Vocal
only 10
minority,
of
though.
them.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure because minority has two things, right? It's not that it
Right,
is
right.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, you want to talk about like, never mind like feather in the cap. Let's talk about like the bird in the fucking cage that everybody seems to be wearing. That is the Snyder cut, right?
Exactly.
Like that is the largest, like most egregious example of this thing that I'm talking about here is like we let people really push these artists to a point. Sometimes because certain people involved on the creative side enhance those voices, right? And like and that sucks for everybody now because now everybody out there is going to be like, well, we pushed them to do it with Snyder, maybe we can get it with this, maybe we, like the there's never going to be a time now where there's not going to be a group of fans for a thing that doesn't do well that is going to be just in your face about how they deserve the Snyder cut version of their movie, right? That's just always going to be in the water now. So thanks a lot, WB, for giving into that.
Yeah. And I will say, I'm not going to beat that for Madam Web. I came to my breaking point with that film when a producer for the film said the only reason they said it in 2003 was so they could use the song Toxic by Britney Spears in the movie. I studied a lot of audio technician stuff, a lot of sound design stuff. You can use a movie that was released before the year the movie is set. No matter what, the music exists.
Yeah.
Like, it just, you don't have to be like, oh, we really want to use Hit Me With Your Best Shot. Gotta set this movie in the 80s. No.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because we did talk about this a bit off mic, but is this the same producer that also tried to claim that there just wasn't much meat on the bones of this?
Yeah, it's the same producer who said we chose Madam Web because she doesn't have a backstory. So really we could do whatever we want with this character. This character that has existed for almost 40 years in comic books had a pretty huge presence in the Spider-Man animated series, which is how most people from the generation are going to base it. I tell the story all the time of the guy who in Bad Boys for Life, punched my shoulder and was like, that's not Morbius from the animated series.
You know, the story, right. The Madam Web stuff was also a huge part of Turn Off the Dark, the ill-fated Spider-Man musical.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like this is such a this is I will say that if the comment had been something more along the lines of, this is a character that does not have as structured of a background as many others in the Marvel Universe, so there's more wiggle room, there's more room to play, I think there's something to be said about that. Sure, yeah. She's not one of the big ones that everybody out there has, there aren't people out there with Madam Web there are after probably, the movie has come out, but there might be people out there with Dakota Johnson tattoos on them now, but this idea that this is not our Venom and Carnage. This is not Spider-Man. This is not. It's
not Green
Doc
Goblin,
Ock, right?
Dr. Octopus.
Green Goblin, right? There are people in the Spider-Verse that have these deep, rich histories and fan bases that kind of demand certain things about these characters that you don't want to vary too much from, because you risk alienating people. Venom Web doesn't have that, but to use the words doesn't have a backstory or doesn't have much of a backstory is wild. It's just a wild comment to make.
Yes. And then to follow that up with, and it's set in 2003, so we could use Toxic by Britney Spears. Yeah. That's really not how sound design works.
Sony has always been this way about wanting to get people in the room to make a certain movie the way they want to, right? This has been the case for superhero movies through Sony since Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man famously had these issues with Sony demanding that Raimi do certain things, despite him as the creator saying that doesn't make sense, and somebody at Sony saying it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, essentially.
He's right? Gonna shoot Webb out of his hands organically, because we can't give 30 minutes to web shooters.
Right. These weird decisions that Sony pushes on these creators. But I mean, even outside of superhero films, yeah. Sony, we don't talk enough about the ways in which Sony is kind of the worst offender when it comes to the studio interference conversation. And we know this firsthand because of all of the Sony leak stuff, 15 years ago at this point? When all of this stuff came out about specifically around the interview and the way in which they really wanted to push certain things in that movie and manipulate things, but also Ghostbusters or anything having to do with what's his nuts there that directed Answer the Call, that had done all the other Melissa McCarthy collaboration.
Paul Feig.
Yeah. The ways in which he was kind of given carte blanche, but certain other people in the industry were in the Sony collective, as it were not being given that, and people were behind the scenes pointing that out and discussing that, and it's well, yeah, we allow him to do this because he makes movies the way we want him to make movies. Whereas, if you don't, then we're going to send somebody in to correct things. Was essentially the attitude on so much of their stuff.
That's what we're seeing with
a lot of people. Sorry. But then it seemed to kind of just go away, and Sony's kind of just kept going about their business making movies this way. And lo and behold, here we are now, where they have somebody in the room making a Madam Web movie who has the balls to say, this character has no depth, and I like this song, so here's what you're going to do. And it's just this is a really weird choices all around, guys.
I mean, that's what we're also seeing, that whole like Sony prioritizes and looks for good soldiers when it comes to the creative process, because the screenwriters for Madam Web were the screenwriters for Morbius. And by all accounts, if Sony tells them this needs to change, they're willing to change it at the screenplay level. So it's not even like they're making sure the movie is as Sony wants it to be before a director even starts doing their job.
Yeah.
And that is something where, like, Paul Feig does the movies we tell him to make, so that's good. As opposed to Sam Raimi, who was like, no, we can't put Venom into the third movie. Venom makes no sense at this point.
Well, it like openly talked about how he didn't have any love for Venom, and so didn't want to do the character because, like, first of all, who wants to do that? Who wants to work with a piece of art that they have no interest in? But also on top of that, he was just like, I don't have any knowledge. Like, this is not a thing that I cannot do this fairly. And Sony was just like, we don't care. We don't care that you've been building this whole Harry storyline for 2 movies. We're gonna force you to also include this other part. And it's just like, wow. I mean, there was even discussions about how he had purposely, like, not that he had ever said this, but like thoughts that he had purposely killed certain characters in the first movie so that he wouldn't have to do Venom.
Yeah. It's a weird thing that we're seeing from Sony with this whole thing, and just how the marketing works.
But my point is, like, it's actually not that weird, because this is just what they've always done, right? Like, we see it as weird in terms of the industry, but in terms of Sony, it's par for the course.
Right. And that leak was 2014, so we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of it. But to say 15 years, I mean, that leak gave us back information 5 years before it happened. So, I understand where you would feel that, but it was 2014, November 23rd, 2014, when the Sony leak happened, and all of this really got brought to light.
I'm at a point in my life, man, where things are just it's no longer gonna be, was this 20, 30, 40 years, it's just, was this pre-COVID or post-COVID?
And that's fair.
That's essentially where I'm gonna be for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I don't blame you for feeling that way. Is there anything else you want to talk on before we touch just briefly on that other thing I asked you to do? Or
let's wrap things up. Let's with a little bit of fun here.
Pop ourselves. So I had my tooth fixed this week. I finally got in to do it. The 2 other times I was supposed to go in, the weather had other plans. So what was supposed to be a 2-week medical treatment to deal with whatever happened in my root canal went 4 weeks, which is crazy. And it's still not technically done because I have to see a dentist sometime this week. I don't have a time yet to actually have the hole that the endodontist made to clean out my root canal filled. I currently have a little hatch in my teeth, and I don't hope that Desmond's not in there putting in the numbers and pushing the button, because that's just scary to me.
John Locke's just running around in and out of your enamel.
Yeah, right? So I got a ride to do it because I didn't know if I'd be doing that. And so
I'm sorry, wait. If they had that would have been such a better, can you imagine that reveal?
That it's just a tooth
all happened inside J.J. Abrams' mouth.
Jesus. That would have been a different way to end and go for that movie. Polar bear in the mouth, and it's really just like one of those bear things. What are those called? The microscopic things?
It gives a lot more credence to the weird smoke monster. I'll give you that.
Yeah, there you go.
It's just halitosis.
Yeah, my God. Yeah. So the person who took me, they had errands to run. So while I was sitting in the car, Facebook showed me a definitely directed ad to pop myself. You can now create pop figures that are you and yourself, and they have all sorts of stuff. So sitting in the car, I designed kind of the Say Report 4 as I view them, which is myself as Sejin, and then my sister Dale, because she does a bunch of our album artwork for very special episodes, and then of course our third musketeer, our Quizmaster General, William. So I designed pops for all 4 of them, and then I asked Sejin to do the same. Mm-hmm. So I do like that we both put you in the buffalo plaid shirt.
I mean, we basically designed the same one. You for me,
Yeah.
like the only difference was that you put me in shorts and I put me in jeans.
You also gave yourself a
Yeah, like
hat.
oh yeah, no,
I
yeah,
didn't know what.
and
None of the
I
hats really
generally
worked
always
for
have
you.
my baseball cap and my sunglasses on and all that. But
Yeah.
that's but like but in terms of the look of the figure, what you designed for me and what I designed for me look like the same guy just on different days, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing even for Dale. What you designed for Dale and what I designed for Dale are basically just Dale on 2 different days of the week, right?
Yes, which is very, very good.
Yeah, that was pretty good. I will say, I love what you did with your character. I
Well,
wish I had saved the first version of you that I had made because it was basically that. I will say that I had you in a hockey jersey as opposed to a hoodie. But what's funnier is that by the time I got onto the Funko stuff, I don't know if it was there when you got
it was
on.
the day
They're
after.
they're
So,
running a whole Dun Kings promotion right now. So you better believe that I just made a Dun King, Devin.
and I will say this: it does look like the same Devin, just on a different day. It also has like a Ben Affleck vibe that I don't
was gonna
love.
say I gave you a little bit of an Affleck vibe because I didn't put the glasses on I originally had the glasses on and I was like, yeah, Devin. And then I realized if I just took the glasses off, it could be either you or Ben Affleck. And when are we ever going to get to say that again?
Right? Exactly. So I'm glad that we connected on that. Yeah, the Dun King thing happened afterwards, and I'm like, I'm not gonna redo it yet, but thank you for putting me in the Dun King outfit. And I'm okay that I don't have a hockey stick but do have a Dunkin' Donuts cup.
Yep. Gave you a Dunkin' Donuts cup and a microphone. Well, I gave you a microphone and me a headset. That was the other thing, is like playing around with some of the small accessories was really fun. Oh, it's a very goofy thing.
Yeah, it's cool.
We should
These are all going to go into the
we
Discord.
should
That's
post
what I'm
these in
going to
the
say.
Discord because there's a good reveal on the Will ones that I was very happy with. But yeah, we'll put those up for everybody to go look at. Maybe we'll send this one directly to Will too.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, like the customizable pop thing has always kind of been in the water. It's usually, to my knowledge, been something much more behind the scenes. But like, watching a YouTuber from the last 10 years and they all inevitably get that vinyl fig of themselves made, to the point where YouTube actually wanted to get in on it and they produced the U2s.
Yeah.
I don't know like how much YouTube is directly involved with the U2s, but they definitely push those as the big promotional vinyl items now. But Funko was always there first. Like the pop figures will always be the vinyl figures that people think of, right? When you say that, they literally fill landfills with them now. But this this idea of the customizable pop figure has always been out there, but to make it this accessible, I don't know how long this little feature of theirs has existed. That was new to me, and it is a blast. It is not nearly as deep as you want it to be. They definitely are going to use it more for this kind of promotional stuff, like with the Dun King stuff. And I imagine, certain movies might come out. Maybe you can get yourself in a Fremen suit when Dune comes out, which that would be fucking wild. Like that kind of shit. Like I could see them doing. But I really, it's a fun little, goofy thing to do, and you can download your stuff just to make it like your avatar for Discord if you want and things like that. It's a good little system.
Yeah, it's fun. I had fun with it, and that was the thing. But I really wanted to see how we would design each other, and we did it. Like, we all kind of had a thing, except for the Will, which we will keep as a reveal for the Discord. So if you haven't joined the Discord yet, send us the email to thesareport@gmail.com, and we can get you an invite. Or, if you just know us, there are ways that we can invite you so you can see these figures. But anything else at this time, Siegen, or are we good?
I just can't believe that we didn't talk at all last week about the literal nickname Mr. Irrelevant for the San Francisco 49ers QB, I think it is. And man, how that has to fucking sting.
Well, you know what? As much as it is, the way that Mr. Irrelevant came along was because they wanted to highlight who the last person in the draft was. So it would be like the ultimate underdog story. And it could be something you follow. I think the real Mr. Irrelevant is the guy who's chosen third from last in the NFL draft. I don't know that guy's name, but I can tell you the last guy who's drafted every year.
Yeah, no, I just, But it is a hell of a story to be picked last like that in the draft and then be on a Super Bowl team, right? Like to be out there and in that game in that position, coming from that last pick of the draft and stuff like that is definitely a fantastic story. Just sucks that it couldn't have had a better button on it.
Right. The ultimate underdog story. I now understand why Dodgeball, a true underdog story, didn't end the way that Ben Stiller originally wanted it to, which was with the average Joe's losing. Because it kind of stings. Because the whole time for the Super Bowl coverage, like the pre-coverage, you're talking about, oh, he's Mr. Irrelevant, da-da-da-da-da. And then you're like, man, it'd be really cool if this guy ends up winning. But then when he ends up losing the Super Bowl, it's like, oh, are we not using it as like a sarcastic term at this point? Has he actually become Mr. Irrelevant?
I mean, I'll tell you this. Basically, after this episode is over, I don't know the next time I'm going to think about the San Francisco 49ers. So
probably August, maybe.
The true irony of ironies.
Yes. And not in an Alanis Morissette way, in the actual dictionary definition. Good. I mean, I don't really have anything else to add, except to remind everybody that coming this Thursday, it's your leap day. It is your February 29th, and it is when our very special episode covering D2 The Mighty Ducks drops. And we've already recorded it, so sorry if anything's out of space and time. I'm real proud of this one, Sejan. That's the reason why I'm doing a promo for it right now.
Man. I'm gonna go. I was about to say I'm gonna go lasso me up some Pee Wee hockey players, but that sounds awful.
Yeah, that doesn't sound as good in 2024. It doesn't sound great in 1994 either. But yeah, it's been 30 years since D2 The Mighty Ducks, and we are covering it. So look out for that this coming Thursday. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you have any thoughts, comments, critiques on anything we said this week, you can always send an email to thesayreport@gmail.com. Or you can join our Discord. We are trying to find a way to put it, like, I guess I'll add it to the Facebook page and all that, but we are incorporating the Discord more and more. Again, if you want to see us pop ourselves, that's the place to go. But with that, Sejan, if there's nothing else, William, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host, Devin Decker and Sejan Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.